It is bug versus bug in the battle to save Nova Scotia's hemlock trees. The hemlock woody adelgid is an invasive species that, if left unchecked, could wipe out 90% of Nova Scotia's hemlocks in the next 15 years. But a specific type of beetle in BC preys on these hemlock-hungry critters, and they're being shipped across the country to help Nova Scotia save those trees. Lucas Roscoe is a research scientist with the Canadian Forest Service. He's our guest this morning. Welcome to Your Morning.
Hey, Anne-Marie, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm fascinated to learn more. There's already been one shipment of beetles to Kejimkujik National Park. It's too early now to see how effective they have been, but what are you hoping to learn over this first year of having them in Nova Scotia?
So the goal of this first year is to kind of evaluate if these beetles can actually survive in Nova Scotia. So we already know that they can predate on hemlock woolly adelgid. That's their specialized host that's in British Columbia. But British Columbia is quite a different place in terms of temperature, winter temperature, that kind of thing. And often in these kind of things, the environment in which these insects actually exist is the most important thing, whether or not they actually survive. So what we're hoping to see this first year is to see whether or not the beetles actually survive, whether or not we can recover them next year. And that's kind of the goal at this point.
And why was introducing the bugs the strategy you went with as opposed to spraying, for example?
Well, spraying is used right now for treating hemlock woolly adelgid infested trees. The problem with it is it's quite a time-intensive and, if anything, economically intensive kind of technique. And if we're going to go into a stand and treat every single tree that's there, it's just simply not possible. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of hemlock trees, not just in Nova Scotia, but in New Brunswick. And we kind of needed a more cost-effective way of dealing with hemlock woolly adelgid. And this beetle kind of represents a really cost-effective, environmentally suitable, and self-replicating way to treat hemlock woolly adelgid in Nova Scotia.
Lucas, I'm just fascinated by the process of this. So you take what is like a shipment container of the beetles from one coast, you ship them to Nova Scotia, and then how are they introduced to this delicate ecosystem?
So the process of actually collecting the beetles begins in British Columbia. So we had a crew of 2 people out in British Columbia a couple weeks ago. And what they actually did is they just went to branches, tapped on the branches, and waited for the beetles to come onto basically a bed sheet. And what they did is they went through all the beetles that landed on this bed sheet, cleaned them, sorted them, made sure it was exactly the species we're looking for, and then shipped them overnight shipping in basically a foam container. Sealed, of course, with tape and in little jars that had wood shavings, some water, just to keep the beetles kind of cozy and alive so they could get to Nova Scotia. And then when we got to Nova Scotia, we found specific trees that we'd identified earlier in the winter. And we released these insects onto the trees. So we just attached the little container they were in underneath the branch with wire, and the beetles woke up and they went straight up into the tree right away.
That is fascinating. I love that they're shipped in overnight. How important are the hemlock trees to the ecosystem in Nova Scotia?
So hemlock is a ecologically and environmentally important species. It grows in a lot of areas where other trees can't quite survive as well. So places, what we call riparian corridors, so places with like river valleys, stream valleys, or places with kind of wetter or moist soil. And the important thing with hemlock, because they're so important in these areas, is that there's literally thousands of other species that need hemlock specifically to survive. And if hemlock was to be removed from these areas, all of these other species would be affected detrimentally as well.
All right, well, we were talking earlier in the show about people experiencing winter for the first time. This will be the beetles' first winter in Nova Scotia. We'll see how they do. Thanks for joining us, Lucas.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.